Vicki, thank you so much for joining me. For those of you who don't know, this is Vicki Werner. She has had a near-death experience, but we're going to go delve right deep into what exactly led up to that time. So, Vicki, if you could just share with us, I know you've had quite an experience and quite a traumatic experience. What led to your near-death experience? Yeah, let's just start there.
Absolutely. My husband was initially he was a OBGYN. He delivered thousands of babies and was one of the first laparoscopic surgeons in the state of Utah where we live. He was really on the cutting edge in a lot of healing modalities, and working the work schedule that he had and the diet that he had, just trying to stay up, and the schedules of delivering babies, a lot of stress. He was also a downwinder in this area from the chemicals that were put in the air from some testing that was done in the state just over from us. There were a number of people who became what was classified as downwinder, which caused cancers. He, at the age of 29, he developed malignant melanoma and was given a prognosis of living maybe 6 more weeks. He had 3 lesions on his brain, 4 on his spine, and he just knew that he had just barely started his practice. I wasn't married to him at this time, but he knew he was not going to die, and is a very spiritual man. So he literally got on his knees and prayed and asked for Jesus to heal him. And he was told in a dream that night that he would be healed, and he was told the name of Hulda Clark, and he had never heard of that name, Hulda Clark. He didn't have any association. He arrived back to his office the next morning, and his whole desk had been cleared, and there was one little pamphlet sitting on his desk, and it was written by Dr. Hulda Clark. And back then, she answered the phone. She had a very small business at the time, and communicated with him about the toxins that were in the food and the water and the air, and how to change, parasite cleansing, and how all tumors are parasitic base, and encouraged him to leave everything that was creating a toxic environment, including a very toxic marriage. His religious belief at the time, though, was that he was married for time and all eternity. If anybody's familiar with that, that's from the Mormon LDS perspective, that you're married for time and eternity. So he didn't choose to leave that marriage. However, he did all of the other modalities that were leading into this. So he did parasite cleansing and antifungals, and changed his diet and changed his behavior patterns and his lifestyle. He ended up losing like 45 pounds. And instead of dying within 6 weeks, he felt better than ever. And he started diving into this much more because his staff was like, wow, Dr. Werner, what's happening? Why is, you're, instead of dying, you're healing. And he just had this compulsion to help other people. And he ended up shortly after, had a chainsaw accident, which he severed his first index finger and could no longer perform surgeries, could no longer deliver babies. And he felt like God was redirecting him on a different path. And so he was doing alternative healing practices, still practicing as a medical doctor, but also offering support for detox programs. That didn't sit very well in the medical community. And by the time we were together, they came after him and set him up. It was a setup for medical billing fraud. And we thought it was just going to be an open and shut case. We thought, well, that's easy. It's evidence as far as HIPAA is concerned that there's no fraud. And he was deliberately trying to show and prove his innocence. That didn't sit well in the judicial community as well. And so in 2004, we both had children from a previous marriage, but at this marriage, we had a 1-year-old that was in my arms, and I was 11 weeks pregnant with our youngest when 6 U.S. Marshals came into our business and handcuffed and shackled him in front of me and put him in prison for 5 months for a crime he didn't commit. That, of course, was horrific for me. I developed an enormous amount of PTSD, and it was a really corrupt system. It actually is a very, very corrupt system. If people knew how much corruption is in the privately owned federal prisons and all of that. So he did a plea bargain. He relinquished his medical license because that's what they wanted anyway. Fined him $280,000. He was on probation, and we were nearly broken financially and spiritually and physically. Just the stress. It was years of fighting that battle, many years. And I know much more now about how that constant state of that dysregulated nervous system, how we can't heal in a dysregulated state. Our brain has one role, and it's to keep us alive, not necessarily comfortable, but alive. And just that constant stress, I developed a lot of symptoms that just progressively kept getting much worse. I had severe nerve pain, horrible nausea all the time. I was started shaking violently. I'd have these muscle spasms that would last hours and hours every day, and excruciating pain. I developed severe food allergies to over 500 foods. And it was just, there were so many alarm bells that were saying something isn't right. We attempted to treat it holistically. We attempted to, we traveled to so many different healers all over the world trying to get to the root of it, but the root needed to change. Something needed to change from within. So I ended up being more of a perfect storm, combination of having some amalgams removed earlier in the year. My daughter had moved away from home, and that was some extra stress. And ultimately, there at some point in December of 2012, I really felt like I was going to die. And I encouraged him to take me to the emergency room, which he did. He was cautious to do that because he knew he had worked in that environment, and he knew their scope of practice of what they were capable of doing. He knew that they wouldn't be offering much support for me, but he wanted to support me in any way he could. So we went to the emergency room. They ran all kinds of tests. And I will always remember there was one nurse that was very kind, but the rest were, I just became a number. I felt like there was no value to the human heart and, give a sense of empathy and compassion. So after many hours, they ended up sending me home and gave me the diagnosis of gastritis, which I knew wasn't accurate. And that was really disappointing, very challenging. They didn't give me anything for pain or nausea. They just sent me on my way, and he put me back in bed, and I was still in so much pain, shaking quite a bit, shaking so much that there were times my young girls had to lay on my legs to keep me from falling off the bed because I shook so violently. I don't know exactly how that was, but I feel like I developed some pretty severe leaky gut, and the proteins in my bloodstream contributed to that, and as much as the nerve pain. So the following evening, I was in bed, of course, and I was awake. Felt like every day I lived in like a meat locker. I had a heating pad directly on my stomach to the point where it would change that my skin would get bright red, but I needed that warmth. I had flannel pajamas and 3 comforters on me, and I was still freezing all the time. So there was a number of things that were off in my system. And then there's warm glow showed up in my room. My whole room kind of took on this different warm glow. And I felt this gentle tugging from my core. and it was very quick and very gentle. And suddenly I was standing at the foot of my bed, seeing my body in front of me. And I could see that my face was very contorted because I was in so much pain. So my face was kind of scrunched up. I could see that my hair was quite messy, just the restlessness from pain and the shaking, and the comforter pulled up around my neck. And I just had so much compassion for that body, because I just, being separate from it, seeing how much pain and challenges this version of me was enduring. At that time, I looked at the clocks and it said 6:52. As a mom, I always have to look at the clock to see if my children need me or anything. So I knew what time it was. And as I was staring at the body in front of me, I heard my husband's laughter down the hall. And I didn't move down the hall. I was immediately in the other room with my family. They were in the living room watching TV. My husband was watching The Simpsons. I felt like it was a little bit more adult humor for our 7- and 9-year-olds. So I was standing there watching them, and there was no way to contribute to a conversation in any way. But I was still very annoyed that he was watching a show with the children that I deemed inappropriate. But I could feel what they were thinking. I could feel and sense their emotions and what they were experiencing. And I had so much love for them. I wanted to join them. I wanted to just say, hey, I'm right here. And they had no conscious awareness that I was in the room. And that took place for a moment. And then I don't know what was the catalyst or why, but we suddenly were on this very long pathway. And at the top of the pathway, there was this boulder, this large boulder that was there. And my husband was sitting on that boulder. He had our 7-year-old in his lap. Our 9-year-old was standing beside him. And then my other 3 children were beside him. And I first looked at my husband, and I was quite confused. And he said, "It's all right, babe, we'll be okay." And I was like, okay with what? I don't know what's happening. And tears started streaming down his face. And I turned my attention to my oldest daughter. She was crying. She said, "It's okay, Mom, we'll be okay." And tears again streamed down. My second daughter had this like strength about her. And she said, "We'll be okay." My son nodded, "We'll be okay." And then my 9-year-old again, same. But then she turned and sobbed into her sister's chest. And then we got to my 7-year-old, and she looked so frozen in fear, and she just looked very frightened and buried her head in her father's chest. And as that was taking place, I was being pulled away from my family. In front of me, further down on the path, were my parents and my siblings. My parents, although they had divorced many years earlier, were still in a good relationship. And I locked eyes with my mom first, and there was a love, but not one person on this path said that I would be missed. Nobody begged me to stay. There was the only sentiment that was conveyed was, "We'll be okay." And behind them were cousins and aunts and uncles and friends, and it felt like every person who would be affected by me not being no longer being here was there to show me that. And at the end of the path, there was this large building that was what I would give the archetype of this building would be like a haunted mansion. It had sharp spires on the roof. It had black crows or ravens. I don't know whether they were crows or ravens, but blackbirds were on the top. The trees were, there was one tree that was dead. The grass was dead. The front gate was broken and dilapidated, and the building was quite frightful looking. In my regular world, I don't go anywhere near any kind of haunted mansion, anything from Halloween type stuff, because that frightens me, and I don't like to be scared. But I wasn't afraid at all. I was just very inquisitive. And I didn't have any control over whether I was moving forward anyway. There was an energy or a compulsion that was moving me through this threshold. And as I came through the gate, everything transformed. The birds turned into white doves and kind of flitted off. The tree all of a sudden blossomed and it had beautiful leaves. Flowers bloomed in the yard. The grass became green and vibrant. And I literally could hear love emanating from every blade of grass. And the building that was in front of me turned into more of a dome, white golden dome building, and became this beautiful, beautiful building. And sound emanated that was a very harmonious, loving sound, and it was the sound of love. I went through the threshold of the door and was met by three beings of light. These three entities, I couldn't differentiate from one or the other, but they were very beautiful, very kind, and I could feel a lot of loving energy around them. There was one in the center that was more of a spokesperson, and they were greeting me, kind of giving me the lowdown of what was taking place. They told me that that there are many layers to the incarnation of an individual, and that this version, this layer of my being was present but attached to my body back in bed via the cord of life. And they told me that the pathway was my soul's representation of going home, and I was shown all of those people to give me an understanding of the impact that I would have. I then at that point, I looked down, and all of a sudden my body dropped off of me, my form. And so I looked just like I did back in bed, but that form dropped off me. And it was a very unusual experience to see my body without any structure, without any bone or ligament. It was just the outer shell of my body, and it dropped on the floor, much like the outfit that you wore the day before on the floor. And at that time, and when I looked down, I then at that point looked exactly like them with this illuminated light. At that time, three more beings entered the room, and two of them picked up the discarded shell of my body. And the third one was walking in carrying this crystal bowl that had crystal water and a soft crystal sponge, and started bathing that body. And they were telling me that they were healing that body. And once that was complete, they moved me to another part of this building. They moved me to another area where there was three large statues. And these statues were approximately 15, 17 feet tall, all very ornate, all very beautiful, a lot of precious gems and gold. Behind those statues was a darkened pathway. And they cautioned me, saying that if I were to go through that darkened pathway, that I would not be returning back to my family, that was the breaking point. And so encouraged me not to traverse beyond those statues. But they stood me in front of the first statue, and the first one was the most illuminated, and it was the biggest. At this point, they said I was being given three gifts, and the first one was the gift of sight. I associate the three gifts. There was a number of times, but I associated the three gifts with these three statues. The first one was the gift of sight, and instantaneously, hundreds of videos started playing all around me. And I did not have there's a classification of near-death experiences, and I think there's about 12 that are benchmarks to show, yes, that was indeed a near-death experience. And usually if people have around 7 of those, it's classified as a near-death experience. I experienced 11 of them, 11 out of 12. The only thing I didn't experience that is typical is a life review. I did not have a personal life review. However, I saw how all of my family lived their life without me, and again, got to my youngest daughter. And they told me that if I were to pass over, I had free agency, and if I were to pass over, she would not live her life purpose, that her life purpose, I would be an integral part of that. And they also showed she was mute for a while, that the trauma of losing me affected her so psychologically that she became mute and very stunted in her development and would not live her life according to what was planned. Of course, as a mother, I couldn't handle that to be the case. And so I turned to them and I said, I need to go back. Sophie needs me. At that moment, I was instantaneously back in my bed and back in excruciating pain. And then the soft glow dissipated. I looked at the clock and 8 minutes had passed since I left my body. I felt it felt like I was there for a few hours, but the relevance of time, of course, is not very accurate. I knew that my husband, he had this ritual. He would bring our children in every night to do prayers at night. And I knew he would be coming in soon. He came in shortly after. And by the way, I was still so sick at this point. I could hardly talk. What I did talk was very mumbled and very weak voice. People couldn't hear me very well, just because I was in such a severe illness. But they walked into the room, and I was on the right side of the room, of the bed, and my 7-year-old was standing closest up here to my shoulder, then my 9-year-old and my husband. And he did a prayer that he did every night, and he prayed for us to have protection. He prayed for Jesus to heal me. He prayed that our children would feel comforted, and just the standard prayers. And once he finished the prayer, my 7-year-old leaned in and whispered in my ear for the first. She's never done this before, but she leaned in and she whispered in my ear, "I need you, Mommy." And my heart just ached, and I could feel tears pooling down in my ears. And I wanted to respond, "I'm going to be here. I'm going to be here." And I just kept touching my legs, touching my limbs, and saying, "God, please let me live." It was about 2 weeks before I had the strength to share that story with my husband. The after effects is I was bedbound for almost 8 months. And we still searched a lot of healing modalities, but I eventually got to a point where I could interact as a wife and a mother again, and just became hyper vigilant to find every healing modality available so that somebody else doesn't have this course as well.
Thanks for sharing. That's a lot to go through. I think, what do you think that the 3 statues represented? Because you saw the one was the gift of sight. Do you know what the others might have been?
I prayed about it a lot. I don't know that it's all been awakened, but I also feel if I were to answer that today, maybe this will change. But the other one was the gift of communication, and another one is the gift of empathy. Those are the ones that I felt like I was developing much more as the time had come through. So, but again, it was never actually confirmed for me. So I don't know. That's when I've been in my quiet space. Those are the 2 that come up.
Yeah. Well, I always think whatever you see is something that's specifically relevant to you, that you'll understand. It's just a symbol of whatever is your gift or what you're going to see. So now your husband was locked up in jail for 5 months. They took away his license. Did anything come out of that? What happened with him after that time?
We were really at ground zero, but when he got home, we delivered our babies at home because he was, he had as a previous OB, he was released just a few weeks before our baby was born. So we spent that time healing those early years, staying with the children, and he worked on closing his practice and closing all of that. And then at the time, because he was already doing some alternative working with homeopathics and parasite cleanses and a lot of supplements, he opened an herb store afterwards. And he just and he was a really, really brilliant medical intuitive. He was super, super intuitive as well, which just helped him as a doctor. And so he eventually moved into doing intuitive readings. He became really well known. He wrote a book called it was with the visitation that he had with Saint Germain, and it was called The Next Step in Human Evolution, that he wrote back in 2014, because Saint Germain materialized in front of him. He was always on this mission to help people detox, but then they would get toxed up again every time they would spray the fields, and so he was looking for a better way, and that was about generating the 24-strand DNA that has been hijacked in the body. And that's a whole other level. But we had this herb store. He traveled quite a bit, spoke at conferences, wrote a few books, and he was he still was a beautiful healer, but not under the umbrella of the medical side. He would, his tagline was, previous medical doctor, now doing better things. So that's how he did that.
I find it such a shame that, because there are people that are really good healers, but I think a lot of the medical staff are institutionalized. The amount of training they get in diet and, as you say, toxins and stuff like that, I think I've heard it's something like 2 weeks.
He did 14 years of school and specialty, and in that 14 years, they talked about nutrition for a half hour one day. And it was, of course, the nutrition that is available is sponsored by these conglomerates. And so it's going to be not accurate anyways, but yeah, it's a tragedy of our, that's the medical world. It's not meant to heal. There's a fine line between healing a patient and killing a patient, and they like to stay in that line, keep them still dependent, pharmaceuticals or stay on a prescription of something, but God forbid looking at the root cause. So yeah, that's just the paradigm that we're in.
And, they don't want to change it, so they will fight it at all costs. I mean, the fact that they had to lock him away shows you how scared they actually were that the truth will come out. And I also find it interesting that the FDA, it's the Food and Drug Administration. Why would they put those two things together?
Yeah, that's an agenda for sure. That's a whole other level, but that's an agenda for sure. And a lot of manipulation. And in the United States, Big Pharma has ran this country for a long time. So, all of the ads that are on commercials and all of the propaganda, there's a lot of that. So, and, there's a lot of people who are willing to be participants because conscious thinking takes energy. So we're definitely outliers on that one.
Yep. And I think, it's not an accident that they're not teaching much in the schools either, because you get taught what to question. And the way that we have been taught is let the professionals deal with it. They know better about your health than you do. Mm-hmm. But how can somebody know better?
Correct. In fact, well, yeah. And, back in the 80s and 90s, there was a hierarchy that I think was very common. It was God, medical doctors, and then humanity. So there was they always were, well, I would say in that paradigm, the level of medical doctors would also be your clergy. There would be, on the spiritual side or religious side, they would be equal to that. But there was a God complex that took place. In fact, there's still horror stories. Yesterday, I heard of a horror story from a friend of ours that there was a baby that was 18 months. They did all of this medical care, and he had the chemotherapy for 18 months, his brand new baby. And but the side effects of the chemotherapy caused the skin to pull off very easily and around the throat, neck. And the doctor got very cavalier. The baby was finally deemed healed. and they were going to be able to take this baby home very shortly. And they said, we'll keep this breathing tube for one more day. And the doctors got very cavalier. People, they just shut off. And I know that working in that environment and seeing death all the time, there you have to build up a little bit of resilience. But he just yanked out the tube, and the baby bled to death. And those are just so traumatizing and so unnecessary. And there's, that's the third leading cause of death is negligence or an action taken upon by the medical community. And they're protected in this umbrella that, with my husband, he never caused harm. He never lost a baby. He was such a great physician, but he was highly scrutinized because he wasn't doing enough C-sections or exploratory surgeries or enough pharmaceuticals. So from the medical standpoint, he was costing them millions of dollars every year. And yet he was very popular with people who knew that he actually was somebody who cared.
It's so sad that people have got this absolute power drive and hunger just for more money, that they've already got so much. I mean, what do you want to do more? What do you want to do with it, And to me, they sign a Hippocratic oath. It's to do good. And there are a lot of good doctors that have also lost their way somewhere down the line, just because they don't want to lose their license, as you say.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they have to follow the standard of care, because if they waver off of that, they're no longer protected under the policy, the umbrella protection that the hospital provides. So, many of them, their hands are tied on how they can even support. And this last few years, we all know the story of what's happened globally in the last few years, and how medical doctors have not been able to support their patients. Even if they have information, they have not been able to offer the support that is necessary. So it's a shame. I think one by one, people are waking up, and I think from a spiritual standpoint, the effects of this totalitarian experience that all of us have had, a lot of fear-based, a lot of propaganda and control, is waking people up to the truth. Thank goodness. And some of that's happening slowly, but there's a movement that's growing for sure. And tribes are building, people are communicating. And, I think all of us have times where we have a conversation with somebody, you're like, okay, you're awake, you're aware, we're on the same team, we're good. And now let's build them and support one another.
You've been on a spiritual path most of your life. So what got you started? Do you think you've always been that way, or do you have a specific memory where you realized you were different to others, maybe?
Yeah, my earliest memories as a child, my family were part of a religious organization that was lived polygamy. It was the Mormon religion. It was the fundamental Mormons. So I was raised by parents who both were raised in polygamous families. My grandfather wanted to live the root teachings of that religion, which was living plural wives. That is not something that I think is healthy for anybody. I don't think anybody has the emotional regulation to live in a plural marriage, especially in this community. And it's just an outdated model anyway. With, there was a time where men were off to war, and just to keep the population alive, that it served some purpose. But anyway, segueing back into this, that my whole family was excommunicated when I was 6 months old from this religion because of power hungry from the leaders. My grandfather wanted to open a gas station, and one of the other leaders of this church also had a gas station, and they thought, well, we can't have this level of competition, so we're just going to eliminate the whole family. My father, they were all builders. My father had built our home. And I'm a twin, and so my mom had twin babies, and three. So we had 5 children under the age of 5. And one day the leader said that they were all kicked out, and my whole family had to move and leave the home and move to another community. And so all of my father, his parents, and all of his siblings were all excommunicated at the same time. So they all moved together in another community. and started rebuilding their lives when I was a baby. So because of all of that transition, they started really delving into automatic writing and psychic mediums and all of the esoteric stuff and reincarnation, past lives. And there was a day that all of the aunts were at my home, and my mom's sewing room, and my grandmother was there, and all of the aunts were talking. And children weren't really encouraged to be in that room. So I was lying down in the hallway just outside of the room listening at 6 years old. And my grandmother said, oh, I had this session, and I found that, my brother's, my dad's brother, Stephen, she said, we learned that Stephen was a woman in a past life. And one of my aunts was like, that doesn't make sense. How has that happened? How do you have past lives? And I can't believe he's a woman because he's a man now. And they were having all of that dialogue, just trying to put the pieces together. And somebody said, what is this? What is it called? And I heard my grandmother say it's called reincarnation. And my little brain said, remember that word. Reincarnation, remember that word. And I didn't know why I needed to remember that word. But when I was a child, growing up, I started putting pieces together about how the home that we grew up, the family room downstairs, the windows were ground level. And I would see men's legs coming down the pathway to go to the front door to visit with my father. And anytime there was a man that came through there, I would hurry up and run into the coat closet and hide behind the coats and practice breathing without making sound. And I started having these little mannerisms that didn't make any sense as to why do we behave the way we do. And later I had a regression where I saw that it was during the Nazi occupation, and my family was in hiding, and we had to practice breathing without making sound when somebody came through. And of course, seeing men's feet outside the window was a clue that, hey, stay on the alert. So that was just one of the things that started leading me into that. My mom when I was 5, my mom also nearly died. She was very, very sick earlier than that, in and out quite a bit for a few years. And I think the fear of losing our mother, a lot of the transition that was happening in our family, and then the searching for something more, just really led all of us on. I was just happened to be raised in a family that started really diving into what more is out there that isn't in the regular populace.
It sounds like you've had a very similar experience in your adult life again, where you were excommunicated in a different sense. It's like all that trauma that happened was repeated. Do you think that your illness was also related to that? Because it's all unresolved stuff from long ago. I mean, I heard that fibromyalgia actually can start as a seed from childhood, and schizophrenia too.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I would say most in the work, even in clinical EFT, when they're finding the root cause of what causes the breakdown of the body, or muscle pain, or what is deemed a autoimmune, which I don't believe in autoimmune, by the way, and we can talk about that. But the breakdown of the body and the correlation with adverse childhood events and things that are they'll say 90% is related to a childhood event, and the other 10% is also related to a childhood event, because it's all correlated. And then taking it further, we can go into a quantum standpoint, and how many unresolved things are reappearing in another life. We carry over unresolved issues as well. And it's been talked about many, many times. I've had many clients who have a mole or a marking on their body, and it was definitely somewhere their life was taken, like a sword or something that took their life previously, or a fire. A lot of times those the wine port, I don't remember what it's called, but the birthmarks that are on the face, a lot of times I've seen anyone that I've seen with that we've done a session, they were burned at the stake or burned in a fire prior in a previous lifetime. So,
but interesting. Yeah, exactly. I know I did a past life regression with my ex-husband, and he was stabbed in his stomach in his previous life with a dagger. And a week later, I discovered this birthmark theory, which wasn't a theory, but I mean, I just heard that if you have a birthmark, it's related. And I said to him, "Do you have a birthmark?" And he said, "Yes, I've got one right here." And he showed me on his stomach, and it looks like a little diamond shape, in the shape of a dagger. But yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So
Yeah.
tell me about autoimmune.
Okay. So I new autoimmunes are popping up all of the time. I mean, the last 10 years, I couldn't even guess because there's new ones all the time. There's hundreds of autoimmune classification. And what autoimmune is, the medical classification is, we don't know what this is, but this is the number of symptoms that show under this, and we're going to give this row of symptoms this title. But it's autoimmune because we don't know. That medical community doesn't know what causes it. But from my understanding and what came through when I was in that near-death experience, one of the videos that one of the things of information that was conveyed to me is that these symptoms are all, they're signals that are there's your brain, the brain body connection. There's a signal that's being sent, and so the reason why I don't like the classification is of autoimmune. My hang up about that is the theory around autoimmune is that your body is attacking itself. And that is so far from the case. Your body is never, God did not create something that's going to be like an AI or go like a robot that goes rogue and starts attacking itself. It gives the impression that it's an attack because it's sending a signal. And the way that, how else does our body communicate other than through signals of inflammation or pain or some kind of signal that is a communication, is going to through some kind of symptom. So it's the language around body attacking itself that prevents us from moving beyond that paradigm. So we get stuck in the story. We start identifying as, this is my prognosis or my diagnosis, this is my disease. And then if we become more of that, rather than, and then we remove ownership or a capacity to take the steps necessary, because following that, you'll hear that language of, I have this for the rest of my life. I have to use this medication for the rest of my life. There's no cure for this. And this is what I'm stuck with. And then that's victim mentality. And that that removes the power to make changes in your life and hands it back to big pharma instead of taking ownership and going, okay, there's symptoms that are actually signals that are actually communicating something is out of balance. So let's look at what's out of balance and take the ownership of how you can be in charge of your life again, back into your own hands.
Yeah, I like that. I think they do it deliberately. And do you think it's related to the high number of vaccines that children are getting nowadays?
Oh, it's just excruciating. I'm very good friends with people who are big names in that world. I'll say it like that. That I've had a lot of conversations. And I'll use the example of vaccine, that they did this vaccine and they injected a number of rats, and then they would impregnate the rats. And then the offspring of all of those rats, 100% of them had skeletal issues. And then any of the ejections of the animal studies that were done, all of the animals died. So they're like, let's just remove the animal studies. Let's go straight to an order, so that people, an executive order, so that people can, or whatever language, I can't even remember what I don't want somebody to hear this and go, oh, that's not what it was. Whatever was deemed the responsible government way of handling that, so that they remove any accountability. But making, so yes, I have a dog, sorry, the background. Anyway, they whatever that is, but the vaccine. My husband's daughter had the Moderna vaccine and got pregnant afterwards. And her child was born with his skull fully fused. And so they had to remove a third of his skull. And there's a number of those cases that are coming up. And that's just one example of thousands and thousands of examples that people are definitely, the turbo cancers are coming at an extraordinary rate. And the breakdown of the body, more autoimmune is happening, that long haul COVID is happening. So immune systems are very depleted. And of course, our air is toxic, our water is toxic, our food is toxic. And that can sound very, very challenging. But again, we've got to be really careful about that, because we could lean into victim again, and we could lean into that we have no control over what's happening in our world. God wins. God wins. We just have to have enough tribe. We have to have understanding. I'm not an anti-vaccine person. I'm anti-manipulation. So if somebody chooses to do that, and they've done the correct studies, and they have, and however, I will say a caveat, there are no studies that show the efficacy of a vaccine. So I'm not anti. If somebody wants to dive into that, everybody has free agency. Everybody has capacity to choose for themselves. I personally won't be choosing that path. And so if you have informed consent and you have information that gives you all of the information that you need of the side effects and the effects and the outcomes, you can do whatever you want for yourself. But I'm going to encourage you to make a better choice. I would say every SIDS case of a baby dying, every case I've ever heard of, that child, is it possible there was another cause that we're unaware of, such as a suffocation type thing? But every case that I have heard, I have a very good friend that they had a baby 9 months old. She had her vaccines, and 4 days later passed in her sleep. And nobody told her that it had anything to do with the vaccine. In fact, she later asked, and they're like, oh, no, definitely not that. They were very clear, definitely not that. Well, are you so clear? And of course, they're taught to say that language, but this normalization of taking healthy children to the doctor, these well child visits, I bought into that paradigm as a mother too. Years ago, I did vaccinate my older children because that's what everybody did. I bought into that as much as everybody else, because there wasn't information that was provided to the public to give them informed consent. But I definitely know significantly better now. There's no way I would let anything touch my children at this point. And they're adding more and more all of the time to the vaccine schedule. I mean, when we were children, there was maybe 8 total, and what are we up to now? 84. I mean, and that language and that understanding that God designed something that is not safe in the environment that it was born into, to thrive, to grow, to learn, that it's inhospitable, and we have to inject chemicals into our body to reject whatever's going on in our world that is unsafe for us. That logic is so illogical to me. It removes God out of the paradigm, and it removes free agency and our immune system and the innate wisdom that our body has to self-heal and self-regulate under the right conditions. So of course they try to add, so we're so overstimulated. All of us are in an enormous amount of stress. Time is speeding up. People are busy and overwhelmed, exhausted, and our immune system is breaking down. Then we live a lifestyle where we're living on the go. Many people fuel their body and their car in the same building. In other words, they're getting, snacks out of the gas station, and they're getting drive-through food. The nutrition has been so depleted. Our soil's nutrition has been depleted. And of course, over time, we become the breakdown of the body instead of, and even they're, spraying the skies and we're supposed to lather all these chemicals on our skin to protect us from the sun, which is actually very healing. So there's a number of lies that have been told to our people. And I'm going to be a truther and say, we can do better.
Well, you know what they say, initially people laugh, then they start questioning, and then it becomes known as fact. And so it's just to get past that initial knee-jerk reaction that people have got, because they don't want to be wrong. I think they're afraid that maybe they did it wrong. And I think also as we are becoming more enlightened, because the frequency is going up, we're starting to wake up a lot more, a lot quicker than we did maybe in the 80s, like you say, when doctors were still up here on a pedestal.
Yeah, yeah. And now that Dr. Google is alive and well, people will, people are researching all of their symptoms before, and they have free choice to go to another provider. And if the doctor isn't meeting your needs, I remember when my second child, she was very tiny when she was born, and she's still very, very tiny. She just always was very small. But the doctor was putting her on these, and I started questioning things, and he kicked me out of the doctor's office, and he said, never come back. And my oldest daughter, she was 3 months old and had gone to, and she had developed some croup and some pneumonia as a new baby. And my mom had told me to give her some herbal tinctures to help break that up. And the doctor pulled it out. I was a young mom trying to follow the direction of this almighty God. And he opened up my bag and poured it in the sink. And he said, never walk in this thing again. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I was so afraid, because this was the only doctor, the only pediatrician in town. So you're like, oh, I got to follow the rules. Today, I'm like, oh no, you don't get to choose for my child. Back off. So yeah, I mean, we don't know until we know. And we don't know how to stand up for ourselves and our children. Many parents don't know how to even stand up against that regime for their children. And you don't want to be looked at as the weird one or the bad one or the irresponsible one. But truthfully, you're the awake one. And there's a tribe that's building behind you.
Yeah, I love that. And it's true. There's so many natural remedies that nature has that are way better. They've got no side effects. They're way cheaper, more powerful. But yeah. So tell us about your book. You've written a book?
Yes. So I don't know if the lighting is okay. This is a little bright, but yeah, it's.
Yep, there we go.
Okay, so this is my book, The Secret to Healing and Recovery. And I also have a caregiver's guide that is the last chapter. So this book, I go into much more detail about my near-death experience and then my healing journey. And so it's healing and recovery, and it's not necessarily specific to a terminal or long-time illness, although it's very applicable for somebody who is experiencing a healing crisis. And then the final chapter is a caregiver's guide for someone who is caring for a loved one with a terminal or a long-term illness, and the guidelines for that support for the caregiver. Because I think the caregiver aspect in our world today is a very shadowed experience. There's many people, I would say most caregivers are going to be family members, because financially people can't afford to hire a live-in nurse, or they can't hire the help. So it's people who have to take off time from work, who sometimes it's a young mother who is balancing her children and caregiving her aging parents, and it's very taxing. And so that chapter is something that I've had a lot of feedback on. But the whole premise of my book, I wrote this for the individual who was very much like me, a young mom doing the best they can in a world that wasn't very supportive for a healing environment and regulating the nervous system. So I go very deep into brainwaves, and I go into the conscious and the subconscious mind, because I think it's healthy to know why we are the way we are. And then once we have that information, that knowledge can turn into wisdom when we apply it to ourselves. And then I go into a lot of conversation about nutrition and the sad American diet, and then also bone broth. Bone broth is one of the number one things that supported my healing. And then I include a number of healing modalities, and every modality, there's a multitude of modalities on this planet, but in modalities that I included in the book are ones that someone can do for themselves. They don't have to hire somebody or work with somebody directly. That my purpose is that you have the power to do what is necessary for your own healing, and you're going to know better than anybody what that is. And so everything from essential oils to prayer, meditation, tapping, EFT tapping. There's a number of things like that that I include in this and then step by step for people and how to use the applications for themselves.
I think a lot of people think that a pill is nice because it's a quick fix, but it's not a thing you just take once. It's a lifestyle change. It's a mindset change.
Yeah. And it's a chemical change in the body. I mean, you're making a change that's chemically based. So people don't, as a general rule, people don't want to look in the mirror and say, what do I need to do to make changes? How did I get here? And, we have to ask those hard questions. I understood the decisions and the way that I struggled with so much fear. I struggled with so much anxiety. I was constantly analyzing everything in my husband's life, trying to protect. And it really caused a lot of stress into my body.
Yeah. Well, I mean, your journey wasn't just I've had a near death and now I'm better. It really took a concerted effort on your part to get yourself healthy again and actually follow what you're teaching in your book.
Yeah. I had to become the teacher and the student simultaneously. Yeah. And those are frustrating because all healing, including healing from grief, healing from loss, there isn't any healing that's going to follow a linear process. You're not, and time is not a healer. Time gives you time to remold to your environment, but time doesn't heal. It's active participation in your life, making lifestyle decision changes and adapting in a new way of being to your environment and external and internal environment that supports the healing.
Yeah. And I like the fact that you're touching on the subconscious mind as well, because a lot of people know they should eat healthily, but they still don't. So they could be eating their chips or their fast food, knowing it's damaging their body. But there's some other drive that just takes over and they're not able to control that because their willpower is only 5% of your brain?
Yeah.
Of your mind. So until you find out why are you insisting on eating that, why are you insisting on damaging your body? What is it that you're trying to self-soothe with?
But the same thing with the conscious mind. If you ask somebody if they want to heal on a conscious level, everybody's going to say yes. Of course, I want to heal. Of course, I want to be out of pain. Of course, I don't want to be on these medications. Of course. But if we start coming back into how is this serving you? And, we maintain behaviors because it serves a purpose in some way. There's always something that it serves, even if it's not a healthy purpose. It makes me feel comforted. It numbs pain. It makes me feel seen. People understand me. I get attention that I wouldn't otherwise get. And that has a lot more power than we realize.
How has your outlook changed from before you were sick to how you are now?
I would say the biggest thing that has changed is I recognized my value a lot more in the regards that being raised in my family, I was raised in a really a loving environment, but there was a lot of trauma too. My father was very aggressive and abusive. There was a lot of addiction in my family due to their own traumas, and so a lot of watching a lot of things, like nearly losing my mother as a child was very challenging. But somewhere in my network was this understanding that my value was based upon the deeds that I did. My value was that I had to work to be accepted. I had if I worked hard enough, I did enough, that someone would deem me worthy to being in their space. And I think that's a lot more common than we realize, is that sense of worthiness of self. But when you go through these types of challenges, I had this moment when I was in this mindfulness state of recognizing how I was chronically trying to leave my body because I was trying to escape pain. And again, back to these brain waves and our innate nature, when we go to the fight, flight, freeze, we all have a predominant one, but many times we have others. I personally am a flight and a fawn person. So I want to make everything right, and I want to hurry up and escape because it scares me. So we have to look at what our responses to stress and trauma, how we innately respond. But those deeper understandings help me to see that I have value because I exist. And that's something that is so simple, but so necessary to know. You're on this planet purposely. You have this path, these relationships, these experiences purposely. God didn't just throw some dice and go, let's throw you in the mix. You're here because you have value and you exist, and thus the value exists. So that is, I think, one of the most fundamental things, is that change of that understanding. But I also become a lot more empowered by having more understanding. I did the hard work. I did the schooling. I did the research. I asked the hard questions. And most of those hard questions I had to ask myself, like, how am I showing up here? What behaviors am I emitting? How do other people see me? And how do I want other people to see? And here's the biggest secret of the whole world. Nobody's going to get a trophy for suffering. At the end of your life, you're not going to cross over to the other side, and they're not going to cheer you for being a martyr. They're not going to cheer you for enduring pain and suffering. They're not going to celebrate you for all the pharmaceuticals you took and all the surgeries you had and all the doctor visits you had. Nobody is ever going to win the game of suffering. So when we understand that our role here is to grow, to learn, and to love. And sometimes that shows up through suffering and challenges, but the purpose was not the suffering. The purpose was the growth that was coming because of the suffering. So that's something I think every person should know.
Yeah, that's very good. Thank you. Do you think your pivotal moment was where the decision was, I'm going to go back, I need to get better? Do you think it was that decision that you made? It's almost like it's not a hoping, wishing, wanting. It's a knowingness.
Yeah, I would say the moment of coming back into my body, before my husband and children came in, and I was again back in my body and still flooded with all of what just took place. And that sign of seeing my daughter and how she was not going to live her life purpose. And I just kept touching and praying, like stroking my limbs. God, please let me live. Please let me live. And there was a fire burning inside of me. I have to live. My children need me. And, when we nearly lost my mother, my parents at that time were living a polygamous relationship, and contributor was the other wife was quite abusive. But what saved my mother's life is she knew that her children could not be raised by the other woman. And that alone, that one element saved her life. And I think that is, that's the case for me as well. The will to live, having the will and the desire to live. If you have that will, God will provide the way. And this last year, I've had to work really hard on the will because I've had such enormous challenges. But I'm here purposely, and I know that I can't do anything to jeopardize my children's well-being. And so I have a responsibility to take care of myself and to live this life as fully as I can, even under the circumstances that I'm enduring.
Yeah, you're going through quite a bit at the moment. Vicki, where can people get hold of you?
So on my website is vickiwerner.com. So I'm sure you'll have that spelled out. So vickiwerner.com, people can access me through that. My book is available on Amazon at The Secret to Healing and Recovery. And if you want to share the link for that as well. But yeah, through that. And I'm still in the healing. I want to be the best version of myself for clients, and I haven't been seeing clients recently due to my husband and son's passing. I feel like I need to focus on my own healing right now, so that not that I'm going to get triggered by somebody else's experience, but more I don't have the resources in myself to be fully available for the needs of a client right now. So I'm only seeing very few clients momentarily, but I think that's going to change very soon in this process. So yes, so just for your listeners to have a deeper understanding, 11 months ago, my husband passed away in front of me right after our anniversary, where he promised me he would be alive for at least 10 more years. He suffered a massive heart attack and collapsed in front of me. 4 months later, my precious son, there was an accident, and my son passed away, and I found my son. So I've lost I had to move out of my home because of the circumstances of my son's passing, and lived in a hotel for 3 months, sold my husband's business. And so my identity, I'm still processing that identity as wife and mother, and still just kind of regrouping. So I've recently moved into a new home and just starting over. And so I want to be the best version of myself, but I do have clients that I will be seeing coming down the pike.
I'm really sorry for your loss. I think losing a husband is one thing, but a child as well, that's just, it's something nobody should have to go through. As you say, grief is not a linear process, but I don't think that's something one would ever feel you'll ever come to terms with, because it goes against our biology. It goes against, to me, nature. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I agree that this veneer that people have put on social media, or the veneer that we can and would do all things, we could, but none of them will. And I want to give the best I can for all relationships, but my children are struggling, obviously, losing a father and a brother as well, and just all of the transition that we've had to be in. So my focus needs to be on just rebuilding and having a deeper understanding of who I am now, because you're right. I think the DNA of a mother, while she's carrying that baby, is so wired in that DNA to protect that child at all costs. And we have this fierce protection, and that was my role. I was this warrior protector of my children and my husband. And my husband and I had a fairy tale marriage. We renewed our wedding vows in 33 countries. We traveled a lot. He was the most beautiful, brilliant man I've ever met. And I'm coming up to our anniversary again in a few days. So it's tender to me. It's very, very tender, because unfortunately I'm in some challenging circumstances with his children regarding the estate. And people are not their best self under these circumstances. So I've witnessed some very, very cruel things that have just really shocked and hurt me. But again, I have to lean on God. I have to lean on the fact that there's a purpose bigger than me. And I've said many times, I don't know what God wants with me. I don't know what God wants with me, but I'm going to keep showing up the best I can. And sometimes that's not amazing. Sometimes I just need to just isolate and just let go of some of these emotions that are very challenging. But I have a very beautiful family, and I have a great support systems, which I've been very blessed to have.
Yeah. Well, somebody said, you haven't lost them. They didn't go missing. They died. Yeah. So that doesn't mean you lost them. and I think when you rephrase, it's often in the words that we use. When you rephrase it, you realize they're always there. I mean, that the other side's just there. It's just a temporary state, but that doesn't take away the grief. That certainly doesn't take away the pain. Yeah. And
I do know that we do plan that as well. We plan for these challenges to there's lessons in this as well. So
well, I can accept.
It's not easy. You're correct. You're correct.
You said, you know what? I want them all now. Then I don't have to go through it again. Just give them all now and I'll do it.
Yeah, give me the accelerated learning course, please. Thank you.
Okay. Vicki, before we go, do you have a last message for our viewers?
I would say that this is what the first thing that comes into my mind as you ask that question. Lean into love. Lean into love. It's really easy to judge and criticize another person and ourselves. It's really easy to scroll on social media and make a judgment call about somebody's behavior. Doesn't mean tolerate things that are not healthy, but have an inquisitive mind and open your heart in a space of empathy as to why somebody is the way they are. And maybe there's a lesson for you there too. But I'm being forced to ask myself to lean into love in relationships with my stepchildren that have caused me more anguish than I could ever describe vocally. But I know that they're hurting and they're making decisions that are really cruel, but I know what it's like to lose a father too. I lost my father 2 years earlier than my husband, and it's painful. And so when somebody's in the grieving process, grief does not give you permission to cause pain to other people. You can grieve and you can call for help, and you may have outbursts because you're struggling with too many emotions that are hard to keep contained in the body. And so we all say things that we don't mean. We all do things that we don't want to do because our bodies are under an enormous amount of stress. Our minds are just so dysregulated with so much shock, trauma. But there is possibility to lean into love if we just give ourselves permission to regulate our nervous system. When we find that we get out of balance, take the responsible steps to get back into balance as you can. If that's meditation, if that's taking a nap, it's going out in nature, if it's drinking something that's nourishing to your body, some warm broth or something, do whatever it takes to be responsible for managing how you exchange energy with yourself and others. And then ultimately choose love.
Thank you. I feel that. And at the end of the day, we all come from the same place. And you don't realize how much your words can hurt somebody.
Yeah.
I think I've also said some things in my life that maybe have not been so nice and heard things that weren't so nice, and you can't take them back. You can apologize, but that's the damage is done.
Absolutely. And you can learn from it and do better next time. I mean, none of us were born with a perfect slate. And, this earth is a school that we're here experiencing school. And if we take the understanding that we're here to learn, so nobody gets a straight A as a newborn baby, but we have experiences and we learn from those experiences and we make it right and do the responsible thing to apologize or make right when we do something where we fall from grace, where we have errors in judgment or we're not our best self. Of course, we all have moments of that. Even as a mother, when we have young children and you think you'll always be loving and kind, and then somebody's scribbling on a chair and then you lose, all coherence. So we have those moments for sure, but we also have the responsibility to do better next time and learn from what we do right and make it a choice to do better the following time.